Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move on to our first panel discussion on business opportunities and challenges with the value chain and connected vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by a panel of experts. As I announce the names, I would request them to please join up on the dais and take their seats. Please put your hands together and help me welcoming our moderator for this session, Mr. Praveen Shashidharan, Partner Cyber Risk at Deloitte. Let's hear a huge round of applause for Mr. Praveen. I would now welcome our eminent speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Tarun Mehta, co-founder Aether Energy. Let's hear a huge round of applause. Mr. Greg Moran, co-founder and CEO Zoomcar. Mr. Ravi Chakodia, founder and CEO of Minder Eye Connect. Mr. Binoy Paul, Engineering Director, Western Corporation. Let's hear a huge round of applause. Mr. Biswajit Bhattacharya, Partner and Executive Director, Automotive Industry Leader, IBM India Private Limited. A warm welcome to all the eminent and expert of panel right here. Before we begin, I would request our esteemed panelists to please stick to the time frame of 1 hour, 5 minutes, which includes the Q&A. Over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and we have put together an eminent list of panelists. So we have got people who are the OEMs, we have got tier 1 player, we have got the technology person over here, we have got the consulting. So we believe we have put together all phases of the industry which is undergoing the transformation. And we will start our session by introducing ourselves and also giving a small presentation. So Tarun, can I request you to start with it?
Great. Morning, everybody. I'm Tarun. I'm the co-founder and CEO for Aether. We build smart electric scooters out of Bangalore. So for this topic, I have very few slides, so I'll go through quickly. What I wanted to talk about was how the value creation and capture is happening in this new industry. This is the classic flow, right? Of product development, research, design, manufacturing, branding, marketing, sales, right? And depending on the industry, value creation happens obviously in all these parts, but it happens in a very it's not symmetrical, right? And depending on which industry you are in, at which phase it is, it can be heavily skewed, right? If you look at the auto industry today, what we see is that a ton of value capture is actually happening in the branding, manufacturing, and the sales part. Product design research today actually pays off little dividend because the technology has been evolving at a very, very slow pace in the last several decades, actually, right? It has been on a sort of plateau. But as vehicles go electric, and rather as vehicles go connected, there's a ton of there are a ton of changes happening here, right? You have all these sensors coming in, you have a lot of electronics coming in, the software stack is completely changing, the software is coming for the first time on the vehicles. And we believe that in the next few years, for the first time, where the value capture happens the most starts shifting upwards, right? So there's a lot of value to be created and captured in the design and the product side. Engineering and the product side, as unlike in the past. A classic example obviously is Apple, where the company that does the product design and the branding captures 90% of the value, as opposed to the companies which do logistics and manufacturing for it. And we think because the automotive industry, because of connectivity, is entering a time of heavy technology flux, a lot of changes, that's where a lot of the value is going to shift. So we will see a lot of OEMs, a lot of players starting to focus a lot of the effort there, right? Today, all of us want to focus more and more on, how do we produce more vehicles? How do we scale stuff faster? I think increasingly we'll see a lot more startups coming in and a lot of the focus going upwards. I'll skip the last 2 slides, just this one slide. As far as connectivity goes, from an OEM perspective, the biggest thing that it is opening up as the biggest opportunity that is connectivity opens up on the vehicles, it allows you to connect with the end customer. In the past, what we've been producing as an industry are really these chunks of huge mechanical chunks, which are depreciating pieces of assets the minute they are sold, right? That's it. You sell them, you don't know anything about the customer, and that's the end of your connection with the customer, right? As vehicles become connected, and not just two-wheelers, I have a picture of the two-wheeler because that's our vehicle, right? But two-wheelers and especially cars, public transportation, everywhere, right? The OEMs connect with the end customer, right? The ability to offer customization, the ability to offer personalization will be incredibly high. And that opens up an opportunity for somebody to create brand loyalty at a very different level altogether. It opens up opportunities to capture value after the sale is made. The post-purchase value capture by an OEM can increase dramatically in the next few years. So I think that's the most exciting piece as far as the business opportunity goes for OEMs, the ability to create, the ability to connect with the customer post-purchase. Right? That's pretty much it from my end. Thanks, Praveen.
Thanks, Tarun. So, Greg, would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I'll keep it very simple, no slides here. But to give the perspective, so I'm Greg Moran, the co-founder and CEO of Zoomcar. We're India's largest shared mobility platform for self-drive. And so I think the perspective that I would want to bring here is that you kind of look at the connectivity movement, at least from the shared mobility standpoint, really in two facets, in two ways. One is kind of from a consumer standpoint, kind of like a front-end perspective, and then more from a sort of a company platform, more of a back-end standpoint. And the trends that have been happening with increasing velocity are really remarkable in terms of improving both the front end as well as that back end. On the front end side of things, what you really see and think about, two main themes. One, reducing friction from a user standpoint when you think about connectivity, and I'll give an example there. And then secondly, about increasing delight and improving that overall experience, that wow factor. From a reducing friction standpoint, you look at something like vehicle access. And so you think about the ability now with many of the vehicles to actually remotely unlock and lock the vehicle just from your smartphone. And that's really, really powerful through Bluetooth Low Energy from other technologies that exist out there today, where you can seamlessly, frictionlessly get in and out in a matter of 5 seconds. Now that totally changed the game in terms of remote access. Now in terms of delight, you have the ability now with so many sensors on board vehicles and so much ability to scrape data from OBD and other ports, is that you can actually in real time understand the driving behavior and the patterns of the user, and you can actually give that feedback more in real time and reward and incentivize the user. And that's something that we've been doing now for some time in Zoom, and I think that's really exciting because it can help the end user to reduce cost and give additional benefits and wow factor. Now, from the back-end side of it as a platform, what you really see is that it really enhances the connected car and the connected vehicle more broadly, gives you the opportunity to really focus on safety security. So the ability to understand in real time how your clutch is getting handled, how your brakes are getting handled, the battery, the engine function. And what you can do is you can have real-time alerting mechanisms, whether it's through voice, audio, et cetera, which can actually give you a lot more comfort and control to make sure that you're going to be proactive as opposed to reactive. I think too often platforms and operators like ourselves, you're doing everything post facto. What the connected car does, it allows you to be very preemptive, very proactive, so you don't have breakdowns, you don't have accidents, especially important in a country where you have 400 plus road deaths per day. So I think that's really, really critical. So, just in a nutshell, those are the two main areas which I see being very, very exciting within connected cars. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Binoy, and if you could present your slide. Yep.
Good morning, everybody. So I represent Visteon Corporation. We are a tier 1. We are well present in India. I'll talk about the challenges and opportunities which we see from a tier 1 perspective. So just a brief about what we do. We are in the cockpit electronics business, and we look at the customer interface part of the electronics, and that's where we see a lot of convergence of the connected vehicle, and how we see it from a user interface is what I will touch upon. So within the cockpit, we see a lot more software-centric features coming in. And also the device convergence, the connectivity. To start with, everybody today needs mobile connectivity, and that's a starting point of connectivity in a passenger vehicle nowadays. And the interface options for the user. From a user interface perspective, we were happier with a knob, then we went to touch, and today we want a voice control. So how does that impact the user interface and how does a connected vehicle behaves in that, from that perspective. So the solutions comes to that it's more of app-based user interface. Now you have a hardware platform, you open that platform for an app development. Think about it as a Android of automotive. No? That's where, that's the thought process in which we are working on in Vistion. We have the intellect of automotive, we develop the platform, we invite the new age entrepreneurs to develop the apps which is needed for the users, and we host it in a secure and safe environment. So the other trend which we see, again, a hardware trend, is a consolidation. The ECUs are becoming much more powerful, the SOCs are much more powerful. So what we see is that we consolidate multiple ECUs and then provide a much more connected and user-friendly interfaces, integrated cockpit with a single control behind. It has a lot of values behind and in front of the customer. I'll not go into the details of it, but what it helps is we can create a secure environment of data transfer. So these solutions basically runs on multiple OS. One would be a Linux, one would be a QNX. And then you can provide a vehicle safety and security as well as a openness which the customer is looking for from a user interface and applications. Some of the key challenges which we see, I think we talked about it a little bit before. We cannot develop a product for SOP. We need to develop a product which is designed to adapt till the end of life of the product. And how do we get there? That's a challenge we all have. And some of the approaches which we need to take care of is that the software keeps updating. You need to keep improving the features. But when we do that, we have to update it over the air, firmware over the air, and those solutions which we all know. But the biggest challenge there is cybersecurity. I put this slide for a few more seconds more because this is a challenge, and we have to get a handle of it from all of us. And the other challenge is, I've just put a slide here which is kind of a transition in our segment, the user interface segment. We used to be button segment, LEDs, LCDs, and analog gauges type situation. Today we are in a Bluetooth, Wi-Fi connected environment. Tomorrow we are talking about AI and augmented reality. What does this mean? The software content is going up, in an exponential way. And we as a company also, we call ourselves a software company nowadays. We have more software engineers than anybody else in our organization. What are the implications for a tier one? Just summarizing it, we have to shift from an integrator to an IP creator. The tier ones were historically system integrators. We integrate solutions. But we have to start doing IP creation unique to the automotive industry. Again, transform to a software technology company. If you're in electronics in automotive, it has to be a software company. We have to run as a software company. And that's a cultural shift also which goes into the organization and the industry. And then, the software talent, hard to come by, keep working on that. So those are the challenges which we, in a connected vehicle scenario. Thank you.
Thanks, Binoy. Ravi, would you like to present your slides?
Hi, everyone. So I'm from Mindai Connect, founder and CEO of Mindai Connect. We are primarily, or I would say only, into connected vehicles. So this forum is extremely exciting for me to see so much interest in this space. So I wanted to focus on the three large custodians from my point of view, which are driving the value chain of connected vehicles. So very simply, I think from a usage point of view, the world is divided into personal user and commercial user. And it's very interesting in these conferences, we tend to focus a lot on the personal user space because perhaps we can relate to that as people and consumers. But as Mr. Petka said, there's a lot of excitement in the commercial user space with connected vehicles. So I would like to focus on that a lot more today. And of course, the third big piece of this driver is the OEM, because there's a lot of value the OEM gets themselves out of this. I've kind of, in this Venn diagram, put the points of intersection. So there are a lot of common value adds that are across the personal use case and the commercial use case, and also with the OEMs. I'm sure most of you or all of you would have come across these things in the past. What I want to talk about briefly today for the next couple of minutes is what's really interesting and different about the personal use space and commercial use space, and how that impacts the entire value chain of the way things work. So think about this. If I have a car or a bike, I'm a single user. The usage and ownership does not change. Perhaps there's another user, my wife or someone or my driver who's also using the vehicle. So at best, you have a single or a dual usership of that vehicle, and it's static. It doesn't change. When you come to a commercial use case, so imagine a truck. You have a truck owner, but actually the truck is being used by different organizations and different people, and it's very dynamic. And the number of people who are interested in the whereabouts of that truck is far higher than the number of people interested in my personal car. And that could range from 10 to even 100. And it's very dynamic. This week the truck is carrying a load for organization X. Next week it will be organization Y. So it's changing dynamically. And I think this is where connected vehicles today and in the past and in the future can add significant value. And this is what I would like to talk about. So this is how I see the whole value chain of logistics. And I've taken logistics per se, but it can be transported to a similar situation for, say, a cab company or any commercial use case. So typically what you have, let's say a truck, you have a vehicle owner who typically owns 4 to 10 to 50 to 100 trucks. And you have these transporters, aggregators, who have their own trucks and who also get trucks from these guys. Now these transporters are then servicing the shippers, the manufacturing companies, who actually need these trucks to carry their goods from point A to point B. And then you have the consignees who are receiving these goods, who could be the dealers, the distributors, or the consumers who are interested in, well, where is my stuff? So you see that, this landscape then changes so dynamically, whereas the vehicle owner is static. And I'll talk about this. So while the vehicle owner is static, it doesn't change for, say, 5 to 10 years, and he's interested in his vehicle and the usage of his vehicle because that's how he's earning money. The transporter is dynamic, so that the vehicle owner could be associated with a transporter A for this month and could be transporter B for the next month. And transporter is interested in the usage, but he's also interested in fulfilling his customers' KPIs that he's signed up to. So more than just the whereabouts of the location, he needs analytics to ensure that he does not fail on the KPI. So it's kind of a preventive exception-based management that he needs so that he can fulfill his KPIs before the end of the trip. I'll come to the driver in a little bit, but then the shipper is not really interested in the truck. He's interested in his consignment, and he's interested in the safety of his consignment. And he's only interested when that truck is carrying that consignment for that point of time. He's not interested in that truck before or after. And then the consignee is interested in, okay, when is that consignment going to come to me so I can offload it, I can plan for a receipt, and so on. So as you can see that, imagine if a vehicle owner has bought a vehicle, all these people and multiple people in these organizations would need dynamic access to data real time. And how does this flow seamlessly when the usership and the people who are using the vehicle changes? And that's a fascinating challenge. And for the last 1.5 years, our organization has been working on it, and we have deployed a couple of projects quite successfully now. And I think the real essence of this is how do we ensure real-time seamless flow of data without compromising on privacy? So for example, the moment, say, a manufacturing company's consignment has been delivered, the access to that vehicle's data should be stopped for that manufacturing company. And as soon as the next manufacturing company's consignment is loaded on it, only that manufacturing company should be able to see the whereabouts of the vehicle, obviously along with the transporter and the vehicle owner. The last piece, which is also extremely important, is the driver. We are having a situation today where in India, the commercial industry is growing, but the drivers is a very scarce resource. And therefore, connected vehicles can really help enable safety for the driver, which is what Greg talked about, and also give him a lot of inputs for the last mile access, which is usually a challenge for commercial vehicles. So that's what I wanted to throw a light on as to how connected vehicles can really impact this whole commercial vehicle ecosystem. Now, just quickly then talking about what we do. So we currently do a lot of white label products for OEMs. We have the largest number of OEM-led connected vehicle programs in the country. We also do a lot of work directly with manufacturing companies and enterprises and trucking companies. And the last slide is an example of that. And essentially, we have a central iConnect platform which drives multiple use cases. I talked about logistics, but we do a lot more. So thanks for that. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ravi. Viswajit, if you could share your thoughts.
Thanks, Praveen. Good morning, everybody. While I was growing up, I used to love one TV series that was Knight Rider. I'm sure it reminds a lot of us nice memories of David Hasselhoff and that kit, a self-aware vehicle which used to share a lot of information, data between themselves and used to fight crimes, or rather stop crimes in the street of New York before it could happen. Now, that was a science fiction. Now, today, we are seeing connected vehicle solutions coming in our market in some form or the other. Now, there are certain immediate benefits which we are already seeing, which is coming in. With better navigation, the drivers are spending lesser time on the road. The roads are becoming safer with better profiling of the drivers, or accident detection of the vehicle from the data which is coming from the vehicle. We are also seeing with better driving behavior or tips on improving the quality of driving, the carbon emissions are coming down. We are also seeing we are avoiding major breakdowns with fault detection early enough and taking precaution accordingly. Now, that's not all. That's only the beginning. And a lot more disruption are about to follow. The convergence of both the assisted driving, it's not yet autonomous driving, but definitely an assisted driving, and the ride sharing is going to create a completely different solution as far as the shared mobility is concerned. We are already seeing assistance, advanced navigation, which is going beyond the regular maps what we see, and it's actually taking data from the vehicle and guiding us to the right fuel station or to the right parking spaces. We're also seeing the vehicles are able to read my calendar and take me to the right meeting. And as a consultant, I travel a lot, and it's a great help which I look for. In-car payments. Now, cars start making payments for the parkings, for the fuels, and for the infotainments. Now, that gives us a huge opportunity for the retailers, for the promotions. V2V, V2I. Now, once it sets in this context, I mean, in some of our earlier discussion, we talked about it, the infrastructure needs to improve a lot in our country, but once it sets in, the current traffic infrastructure will become redundant. We need to think about that. In-car entertainment, a lot of it is already happening and more to follow. Now, once this vehicle become more autonomous, more assisted in terms of driving, it frees up a lot of space for the driver, and a lot more digital content are likely to get in. So where does it take us? So there is going to be a lot more for many other industries. In the city of Nice, one of our OEM partner is working with the Council of City of Nice to give them the vehicle data so that they can do the road repair well in time. Insurance companies globally are one of the early adopters of this vehicle data to improve their reach in the market. Now, in our country, there are issues in terms of leakages. There are issues in terms of the renewal of insurances. Now, this is something which is most of the companies are looking in a very, very big way, and a lot of potential which is going to be there, and a lot of changes, disruptions also likely to come through this. We talked about the automotive OEM and the suppliers. It's a huge tool, the data which they are receiving, which is a huge tool to make their product a lot better, a lot smarter. Its ability to connect to the consumers, ability to give them an experience and make them a lot more brand loyal. We spoke, a lot of my predecessors have spoken about it. Now, similarly, in public transportation and very logically, the internet service providers or the technology provider, there is a lot of space for them. But more importantly, if we look at GM's OnStar program, so what it has created a platform where others are able to come in as a part of the marketplace and become a platform player and rather than just a mobility player. And that's an area where other industries will come in as a part of the automotive or the mobility experience. Now, all are not fine. Of course, there are roadblocks which you need to look at. I look at these 4 major roadblocks which we need to work on very quickly. Number 1, regulations and the standards. As we move towards assisted driving, a lot of work needs to happen, and there are a lot of global standards needs to be pushed in. Infrastructure, a lot of it has been spoken, and for our market, there are definite improvements which are required. There are 2 other very important aspects which also we need to focus on. As we move towards the assisted driving or even the e-mobility, the liability as well as the data ownership is an issue which we need to kind of focus on. There have been talk about it in very recent past in our country, and a lot of it's happening across the world. But these are those top 4 areas where I see we need to work on while the technology takes its own course. Thank you.
Thanks, Biswajit. So good morning, everyone. I've been given this task to summarize all the deck, and I hope I do a good job about it. But Biswajit, I started with Star Wars, and so I'm still waiting to see the cars flying across galaxies and can be autonomous in nature. So that's what I'm looking at, and hopefully in my lifetime, we can get there. Now, when I was looking at explaining how the complex scenario is and what are the opportunities and the challenges involved in it, I felt this was apt enough, because all these things have to come together to make things happen. And it is just not about an OEM getting the acts together, or a T1 player getting an act together, or a shared mobility service provider getting it. The regulators and lawmakers have to get their pitch in with whatever they can do. So all these things have to come together for this story to be a success. And I think it was put very well by Dinesh Paliwal, so I thought let me just share that with you. Now, if you look into it and the kind of transformation that we are getting into, this is going to touch each and every industry. And some of them I've just highlighted over here, which has got a major impact, but it is going to change everything. Think about, if we have autonomous car or connected cars in a way, and I travel between Chennai and Bangalore and Kerala and other neighboring states for my day-to-day activities, and I pay quite a lot of amount of money to the airline industry. If I have a connected car, then I can just sit on this, tell my car where I need to go and come back, and that's an industry that I'm going to disrupt. So they need to look at a different value chain that they need to bring on board because of the transformation which is happening in this industry. Some of these things will have to come together, so I put some of those points which the panel spoke about as well. Let's look into a little bit of a deep dive kind of a thing, right? Now, if you look into the challenges which is there on the technology side, some of these technologies, at least that we have, is getting into shape on the IT side of things. Now, if you put that into a car, that's a different world altogether, right? So are we ready? Is the technology on 3D printing and artificial intelligence ready? That's a question to be asked. And that's something that we will discuss in the panel as well. Second is about the economics part of it. Is the infrastructure ready? Is the government going to spend money on the infrastructure to get all these things ready? Do we have sufficient buyers for this? Data monetization, and whether you see it in India or outside India, there are laws which is coming in which is putting restriction on how you can use the data. Now, there is also statistics, which I'll speak about it later, which says how much of amount of money that you can get from the data monetization itself. From the place of production to financing options, and is the shareholder willing to invest and pump in billions and billions of dollars to make all this research and development happen and make this reality come true? The third is the environment itself. I was reading an article very recently which spoke about, is the electric vehicle really going to reduce the carbon emission? The argument was that some of the fuel cells or the charging point which is going to provide the electricity for the cars to be charged is going to generate the electricity using the traditional fuel, the coal and the petrol and so on and so forth, and so that is just going to add up. So you're just burning it in one way, and then you're just going to say that you're reducing it the other way. So you need to look into that ROI kind of thing. Then there is the lawmakers and the regulators which needs to come in to make this, all these things, make sure that ties together. It took 100 years, and still the laws of driving a mechanical car is still being formulated or is being changed. Now, if you're taking the car and making that into an IT box with 4-wheel, then the laws has to be rewritten or drastically be changed for all these things to happen. It's just not about the material, it is also about how you can drive in the car, who is going to be penalized if the car jumps the signal, for example. Is the car going to be penalized, or is the owner going to be penalized? Or let's say the owner has lent it to his son or his friend, who is going to be penalized in this case? Right? Or is it the manufacturer because it was a software flaw because of which the car jumped the signal? So these are the questions which has to be answered, and it has to be put together, sort of thing. Then there is the society. And when I have been doing this for quite a long time, but when I talk to my father, he says, is it really going to happen? Now, are you saying that I'll just get inside the car and say, go car, and it will go to where I want to go? And is this a reality? Is it safe? And should I be taking that car? And so there is an hesitance on an adoption of this technology as well. So these are some of those things which we will have to get through. Now, if you look into it, there is merit to it. For example, e-mobility, based on a survey which was carried out by Deloitte and the study which did, there is going to be 17 to 36% of benefit which is going to come in. And 17 to 36% of alternate drivetrain is definitely going to come. Right. Second, on the sharing economy, 23% of cars is going to be produced less than the last year because of the sharing economy. So there is a revenue loss over here, but then there is a gain in multiple other ways. Autonomous driving, focus on R&D, on efforts on self-driving vehicles, and that's something which is continuously going on. And a lot more need to be done for it to be finally coming and hitting the roads. Digital business model. Now, the loss that you're having with the shared model can actually be covered by monetizing the data. According to the research was carried out by Deloitte, you can have 20% take on your total revenue just by monetizing the data, and 19% on EBITDA. So that's the kind of revenue that you're looking at by monetizing. Workforce transition, one of my colleagues spoke about earlier as well. 50% of the production workforce is going to be laid over or will have to transition from production to IT. Are we ready, and is the workforce ready to provide that kind of information? Manufacturing 4.0, no matter what the model is, and with the technologies which is there, whether it is the 3D printing and others, there is definitely at least 20% of efficiency which can be brought in by adopting new technologies. Whether it becomes a connected car or an autonomous car, you have 20% which you can get by just optimizing the production facilities. Now, if we put it in a two-quadrant, these are the questions that I'm going to ask. And so one is the capabilities of care, and another one is the balance of the power. There's 4 scenarios that you can look at. Will the OEMs become hardware platform provider? That is, the technology company rules the roast, and OEMs just provides the 4 wheels and the chassis to them, and then it is up to them to divide. Second is the OEM runs this and has the complete control where they make niche services. They also monetize the data and the mobility, and they provide customized solutions and then provide a differentiated value chain for the consumers. Then there is the stagnant car maker where you maintain the status quo, and there is an incremental change and efficiency which is being brought into the production part of it, and you stay over here. And last is the doomsday, right? Nothing happens. The fad goes away. People just come back, and we are still where we are. Whatever efficiencies can be brought about, and whatever the differentiation can be brought about, and the technology creeps in, but at a very slow rate. The adoption of technology onto the car itself becomes very slow rate. So these are the 4 quadrants that we look at. And this is something that I'll be asking my esteemed panel to provide an answer from their side. So thank you. So Biswajit, to start with, what do you think a car will look like in 2025? What's your take on it?
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. See, in next 2025 is around 5 to 7 years' time. See, the couple of very clear direction what we see, there is a definite push towards EVs. And if we look at from our market perspective, Government of India is already pushing for electric vehicles. So that's a regulation. But more importantly, what I see, Praveen, there's going to be a pull from the market which is going to come in towards electric vehicle. There was one survey which was done in US recently. They asked the owner of the Tesla vehicle that what do you like in that vehicle? And any of you have seen that vehicle or driven that vehicle, that's amazing, right? The most common answer came, there is no exhaust pipe. So that pull is going to come in our market also very soon, maybe at a different end of the market, a particular segment of the market, but definitely is going to come from that perspective. So that's number one, market is going to push the OEM for introduction of the EVs in the market, number one. Number two is that the vehicle is going to become more digital. So it's going to be a fusion of digital and the physical world in the vehicle. The connected vehicle is already there in some form or the other. It's going to push into the new level, of course. Most of the OEMs are working towards providing a different level of experience to the customer. And again, it's a pull. We did a survey last year. We looked at what really the consumers are looking at. Even we had interviewed the OEM CXOs to try to understand what is their view, how in the next 10 years, how the market is moving. So one theme which came very clear, saying that consumers are going to buy experience rather than buying a particular product. So that's a big shift as far as the automotive industry is concerned, because the industry had been always focused on creating a very good product. The focus has always been on the product rather than an overall experience. So that's the second shift which I see. And gradually, I think, as far as our market is concerned, we will move in some small way towards assisted driving. That's probably the third take what I have.
Thank you, Biswajit. Ravi, Biswajit spoke about the pull. Is it because the technology is there and it has been pushed across to be embedded into everything in our life, or is it actually a market need to have those things? What's your take on it?
So I believe technology availability is a hygiene factor, and if it's not available, it cannot be given. But adoption and scale adoption is always driven by market dynamics. So if you look at the connected vehicle scenario in India today, we have people like Mr. Petkar, who have been pioneers in connected vehicles and commercial vehicles. And they launched Tata Fleetman, I think 4 or 5 years back, or even earlier than that. And you have had similar experiments in the connected car space, and still happening today. But clearly, the traction in the commercial vehicle space is a lot more than the traction in the connected car space. Now, that does not mean that the need is not there. But one, on the commercial space, it's an established need. It was there 10 years back also. People were using GPS trackers today that, which have grown into connected vehicles. So the need was there, and now we are fueling that need with better data and better insights. On the consumer side, the need is evolving. It's a new user behavior. It's a bit like how smartphones were launched in, say, 2006, 7. And many of us, including me, felt, well, I have a great Nokia phone in my pocket, I'm very happy. And in 5 to 6 years, that changed. Now, obviously, all that is determined by the market pull. So I am a fundamental believer that technology cannot dictate, technology can enable, but it's the market forces that dictate. But yes, technology can provoke imagination. And availability of technology can provoke the need and imagination of great entrepreneurs and people to offer something which is exciting.
Thank you, thank you. So Binoy, and you put a lot of technology into the car, right? And so how about the safety and the privacy part of it? Can you touch upon a little bit about it? And how you're securing the cars and how you're making it safe for people to drive around?
So I think again, I'll bring it from a cockpit electronic standpoint, right? So the safety aspect of it, one of the things, fundamental things, we all have vehicle knowledge in the vehicle architecture. We don't want an external data breach on a CAN communication or an internal vehicle control systems. We don't want the connectivity to come into play. So we use technologies like hypervisors inside the modules which we put, the electronic modules, wherein the user experience, the connected user experience is intact, but that doesn't bring any challenges to the vehicle control systems. So that's a fundamental aspect which we work on, and the cybersecurity part of it is the other one. The data connectivity is there. When we talk about cybersecurity, the moment you have any connectivity, even a USB port opened into the head unit is a challenge. So those are issues which we tackle from a security aspects in a data safe and secure way of using the vehicle, but still giving the consumer the user experience they insist. Being a smartphone addicted generation, how do you give a smartphone feel and into the vehicle? And we can do that in a secure way. That's what we have been working on, and we keep working on that and deliver. So that's the security aspects I would look at.
Sure, sure. So Greg, in your speech, you spoke about monetizing the data and using the data to provide services to your customer. Can you talk about data monetization and how is it ethical? And that's also a question because it's my data, right? Now,
Sure.
So can you talk about it?
Yeah. So no, of course. I mean, that's a big question that comes up very consistently, especially in the EU and the US. Not as much here in India, but I think it's very layered because it kind of course, depends on what type of data you're talking about. So there's different dimensions of that. So I think what you'll see on the retail side in terms of the end user, and I can just speak for our platform, is it's fairly benign what you're actually doing, right? And I think you start by really ensuring that you're communicating that you're delivering value to that end user. So in our case, it's really, since it's about self-drive, right? So you're talking about how do you make him safer behind the wheel? How do you make him more comfortable? So that's something which is definitely helping reduce friction. It's helping to increase value as such and delight. So I think if you're really very upfront and clear in terms of communicating, that's half the battle. But I think what we really focus on is really ensuring that the UX is something which is very, very, very pristine and clear, so that it's very actionable. So if you get a feedback that says you're driving in such a way where it's very harsh braking, harsh accelerating, as long as you're able to deliver that in very, very clear sort of real-time messages, and people can act upon it, and then you can see some value and you showcase that, then I think it's definitely not so much of a challenge. So it's really more about communication, expectation setting more than anything.
Sure. Thanks, Greg. And so Tarun, and from your scooter has the fuel cell, and you have brought that to the market, and that's a revolution that you're trying to bring on board. Now, there are very few parts than a combustion engine. So there is a lot of impact that you're bringing to the workforce, because traditionally for a car to be, a scooter to be built, there were so many parts which were going into it. Now the jobs are gone, and you're bringing, you're transitioning all these into putting the connected thing onto your scooter as well. So how is that transition happening, and what do you see in the future happening?
So first, it's a misnomer that electric vehicles have fewer parts. Electric vehicles have fewer moving parts, right? But they actually have a phenomenal number of parts still, especially if it's a reasonably powerful vehicle, right? For example, we have more than 400 parts that come to our plant for this vehicle. Our tier ones have, I think, close to 2,000 parts that come to them to send those to us. Right? It's actually a pretty high number of components. What's changed, however, is that it's not your, like about 70% of the value of the vehicle has moved from classic automotive vendors to somebody completely different, right? You've got cell suppliers, you've got motor vendors, you've got controller vendors, you've got actually half of the bill of materials will be honestly electronics. Actually more than half, almost half of the bill of materials is electronics. And most of that was never a part of a typical automobile in the past. So I think that's a big change that's happened. Jobs haven't gone away. The value has not been destroyed. It's just that it's completely moved to another partner altogether in the ecosystem. And what it does to us, I think while that's happened, on the OEM side, and as you said, right, like instead of the product, the focus shifts more on experience. And with all this electronics, with all the connectivity layer that you have, OEMs now have an opportunity to unlock a lot of value there, right? Which is what I was talking about. So I think jobs across the platform honestly don't go away anywhere. Your classic mechanical repairs go down, yes, but then you are opening up more and more opportunities to provide services to the customer, right? And then they create new opportunities. So yes, it is true that it has moved, but it has moved to somebody else. It hasn't been.
And you're adding value to it as you go down the value chain. So you're bringing in more values to it. And so you're enabling the workforce also to transition from a blue collar to a white collar and probably a much higher.
You definitely need you need a different workforce. The skill level has to be higher. You're not just, obviously you're assembling a vehicle, so you still got a frame, you still got tires, tubes, suspensions to assemble, but you're dealing with a ton of wiring harness, right? A wiring harness on a reasonably evolved two-wheeler these days, electric two-wheeler, smart electric two-wheeler, will be as complex as a actually high-end sedan, right? So the sort of workforce that you need on the shop floor shifts a bit, right? It's a more skilled job that they now need to do.
Thank you. Greg, and one last question to you as well. What do you see as the future of the shared mobility, and what are the challenges which is coming in?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think it depends on the time horizon you're looking about, but certainly over the next 2 to 3 years here in India, I think what you'll see is something which is very steadily evolving in the direction of the consumer to, again, as I said, reduce the friction of the ride and the overall experience. So you'll have a much better, more sort of reliable and consistent experience because of the connectivity within the vehicle. But then within self-drive specifically, I think what you'll see is you'll start to see a lot of different sort of value creations being unlocked. So based on driving behavior, you'll be able to push in certain sort of elements such as sort of more customized music playlists. You'll be able to have sort of more personalized, narrated road trips that'll come in terms of more content which will surface algorithmically based on driving patterns, etc. So this is something which is very, very common now, I think, in some of the circles. But I think that's something that certainly will go out there. But I think more than anything, because of the connectivity, you'll see much more sort of full stack solutions being developed. And I think just like you saw when when the guys at Apple unveiled the store about 10 years back, you saw an unleashing of creativity from a platform standpoint. And I think more than anything, that's what you'll see developers and other really creative individuals putting this sort of content and excitement back into the experience.
Thanks, Greg. So we can open it up for the panel, and you can ask any questions to the panel. If there are no further questions, I have a few other questions which I can continue, but I would like to ask the audience. So if it is a specific question to any one of us, you can point out, so that it will be easier, or if not, we'll just stand.
Yeah, good morning, Greg. This question is to you. Since Zoomcar is into the space of connected vehicles for a pretty long time in India, so just wanted to know, you have been talking about the B2C domain, right, where you're talking about reducing the friction towards the customer and making drives more comfortable and on that aspect. What about the data monetization towards sending the, commercializing the data you generate about the drive patterns or vehicle performance to the OEMs or to the Tier 1 suppliers? Are you is it already on the paper? Is it on the papers, or are you already implementing it, making money out of it? How is Zoom exploring on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to take a long-term view there because it's something which is still in its fairly nascent stage. So I think you really have to ensure first, of course, the data quality. So by and large, you still have fairly noisy data here and there. But I think there are two major players that would benefit from this type of data, right? One, of course, as you said, the OEMs. The second being the insurance companies. The insurance companies, that's something that you've seen quite a bit. It's fairly ubiquitous now in US, Europe, and China, where a lot of the platforms, the shared mobility platforms, are providing this data back more in whether it's real time or on a sort of weekly, monthly basis to insurance providers. And that way, they can also help better curate their policies, et cetera, and products. And so that's certainly one monetization channel which will certainly emerge in India over the next coming years. You're starting to see the IRDA loosen up in some of those respects. But I think, yeah, with manufacturers, I think more than anything, what we've seen, and we already work with several of them on this respect, is that a lot of the data that we share, it's not so much about monetizing directly, but it's more about a collaborative view over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to look at even thinking about can you actually have more specific sort of ground-up engineering and product design for shared mobility. And you actually saw this first and foremost within bicycles, and then also within scooters, is that the traditional sort of retail cycle or scooter is not fit for shared mobility. And so most of the players, especially out of China, have then gone and done significant customizations, ruggedizations around the same. That's now starting to happen on the car side with shared mobility from some of this data. So it's more about that in terms of co-development as opposed to, say, monetization per se right now.
Hello. Yeah, this question is for Mr. Tarun Mehta. I would like to understand, as the scenario is changing from the traditional cars to the AECS cars, what challenges or change in strategies you see for validation of this integrated cars?
You mean as vehicles become autonomous, what changes in terms of the validation?
Exactly, yes.
So we don't build cars. One point, but just thinking about it. See, as far as connected vehicles go, the one thing that definitely changes, and actually you have to invest a lot more time on than the past, is in the software stack, right? And the quality of the software stack. So what happens is, in this world, you're sort of bringing the agile development in, but that often is very iterative, and that often is very buggy at the start, right? So building the right building the right separations to ensure that your software does not control any of the essential functions, assuming you haven't gone full autonomous, right? Your software does not fully control. So in our case, for example, to ensure that software does not, our dashboard does not end up messing with your throttle, or does not give a wrong brake signal, right? Or does not suddenly kill the motor, right? Like, this takes actually a fair bit of validation work. Like, I believe almost 10 to 20% of our tests are, which would be of the order of about 100 to 150 tests, are just dedicated towards testing this again and again and again, right? And this is something, because software keeps improving at a very rapid pace, unlike hardware, puts a lot of stress on your validation teams to just test for this again and again and again. As vehicles go full autonomous, however, this separation is not possible. Something is going to be controlling it. So there are now new standards coming in, right? In the for the code that you use, and following those, I think will become really essential. So I think it's a lot of challenge will shift towards ensuring quality of software. The mechanical tests, I don't think will change a lot. Most vehicles, anyways, are tested for ensuring the wiring harness quality and all of that. So I think it's primarily the software testing that will increase massively.
Thank you.
Maybe again, I can add on to that, just to put that in perspective a little bit. So vehicle testing, when it comes to autonomous, think about how will you test a artificial intelligence code, right? The use cases is where it goes to be focused on. You'll have to look at a lot more use cases. You'll have to look at all sorts of different types of testing. You'll have to automate the testing itself. Then you have to do the exploratory testing. Then you need to bring in the experts to look at all the different use cases. So just add on to that, like the software part of it is going to be the challenge, and it's already a challenge. You don't have to wait for the autonomous vehicles. Okay, the current vehicles have the amount of software, the amount of time and money we spend on software testing is much, much more than the hardware validation already. And in autonomous vehicle, it's going to be much, much more because the code itself is evolving. And then on top of it, you are talking about adapting. Like SOP is not the end game. You are adapting the product through the life. So you have to, whenever you deliver something on the server, through FOTA, you have to be verifying it. So the validation aspect of it is going to be a huge
That's exactly
challenge.
what I was talking about, right? Like, because you will keep pushing upgrades, unlike your hardware, which needs validation once and your platform is set, your software will keep getting upgraded every now and then. In fact, every time you upload a patch, like that needs a ton of testing. And every time you create an over-there upgrade, it's like a nightmare in terms of testing, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and you can do the reset mechanism of a mobile phones in a vehicle, yeah?
Yeah. So added to that is also the continuous monitoring which has to happen, right? Because it's not like, once you send it out or there and you don't have to bother about it till the next update. So you'll have to keep looking at it, secure it. So some of these vehicles are coming up with SIEMs, which is Security Incident Event Management Systems. So that at least the cars are there, there's fleet SIEMs, all these things are getting inside the car itself. So as the cars are transforming from more to more mechanical to IT, and all these things also are coming into picture.
Yeah, I have one question for Mr. Binay from Visteon. So when we talk about the infotainment side, which is delivered out of an in-dash system on the vehicle dashboard, so do you see any clear trend emerging in terms of streaming of infotainment rather than the stored content? And in case you were to stream them, then you need to really upgrade to a broadband kind of a network, something like 4G LTE. And you also have to keep pace with the operating systems, like in Android today you have 9.0. And while in the vehicle you might be stuck with 6.0 version. So how do you really catch up with the Android upgradation and you deliver streaming instead of stored content?
Yeah, no, very good question. Android-based infotainments are already being worked on. Okay, we already have Android-based systems in development. So that's a given. We will have to support, and we will be working on that. On the part of streaming, you are very right that once the data pipes are more affordable, and we will definitely have to have that facility. So either it can be your own device streaming through a Wi-Fi, or you stream through the air with a dedicated connectivity in the car. This is already there. That facility is already there. The newer infotainment systems already have the powers to handle that. Okay, so it's a question of additional use case from an infotainment perspective, and that's already there. Yeah, it's already happening.
Enabler is one of the major enabler is network, and yes, you have touched all the points. But with respect to network, how this challenge gets addressed when the vehicle is going from network area to non-network area, again come to network area, and we are talking about some decision makings also. So how this challenge can be addressed?
Maybe, Praveen, I will just give an anecdotal thing. See, in the GPS systems also this happens. Yeah. So we have a solution called data reckoning. Okay, so when the GPS signal is not there, we have a data reckoning, we manage that situation. So we have to figure out a situation where the streaming is stopping, you have to do the buffering, you have to play from the buffer. Of course, it won't be that the entire stretch of if you are 10 kilometers without a network, you can still maintain the same, no. So there's always going to be fallback solutions for all these connected solutions. To the point which we talked about, we are not going to drive the car only with a connected solution, okay? The fundamental controls of the car will be independent of the connectivity, right? So that has to be ensured. That is where we have to have that balance of the control side of it and the entertainment side of it, or the user experience side of it.
You've got most of the processing usually on the vehicle, even on the base versions, and even in autonomous that would have to happen. You can't rely that if internet goes off, that's it, we're all stuck now, obviously. And for cases where, like in the city conditions, most of us struggle with, prolonged black spots. So you just do a lot of caching. You just store it locally for even hours if required, and then you upload it as soon as it pops up. You will lose some not functionality, but you lose some features for a short file. But that's it. You usually nobody will design a vehicle which will lose functionality if you don't have connectivity. You just can't.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Let's give another huge round of applause. Thank you once again for a power-packed discussion. Thank you once again for being right here with us.